I want to be clear with you all that a new day has come. To San Francisco, to Oakland, to Baltimore, to Ferguson, to Atlanta, there is a movement sweeping this country, and we are not going to stop until you stop killing us.
Shut it down! Shut it down! The time for the middle ground is over.
Many of y'all have heard the news. I've been talking about that I've taken up surfing, or rather I should say I've taken up the practice of getting on a surfboard and falling off of it repeatedly into the ocean after maybe a second or two of standing up. But the peace that I have found on a board in the water is indescribable. My kid and I have spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz, and we'd be sitting on the beach out there, and there'd be a sea of white folks, and then smack dab in the middle, a crew of black surfers. They look so cool. We used to stare at them and be so happy they were there, being blackety black in a traditionally white space. Seeing them might be part of why I ended up taking up surfing at 49 years old. I would come to learn, though, through my kid, that those surfers had a name and an organization, Black Surf Santa Cruz, and their founder, I have learned, is an incredibly powerful young woman named Isabella Bonner, and she joins us today. Bonner is the founder, executive director of Black Surf Santa Cruz, a community organization creating access, joy, and belonging in and around the water through community-centered experiences rooted in healing and connection. Good morning, Bella.
Good morning, Kat.
It's good to see you. The last time I saw Bella, she was being brilliant on a panel called Black Faces in Ocean Spaces, or that was the conference, I guess. So we're going to get into some of the stuff you talked about on the panel, but first, I actually want to start with a little bit about you, like where you from, how you grew up, when did you discover surfing?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I grew up in the Bay Area in San Mateo and actually moved to Santa Cruz in middle school. And I didn't discover surfing and get on a surfboard until 2020. It was actually a paddle out for George Floyd that got me in the water for the first time.
Okay, talk about what is a paddle out, because not everybody knows what that means. What does that mean, and what was the George Floyd paddle out?
Of course. So, a paddle out is a traditional Hawaiian ceremony honoring the lives of those who have been lost. So, it's a ceremony where we're able to call people's names into a circle. People will paddle out on their boards, go into the ocean, form a circle, and chant and throw flowers into the center, honoring the life of the person who has passed on. And in 2020, there were a series of paddle outs honoring the life of George Floyd, which is actually what really propelled me to get into the water and honor his life and kind of create this organization based on those roots.
So connect the dots from Bella on a board, doing a paddle out for George Floyd in Santa Cruz, to now we got black surfers looking cool on Cow Beach and a whole org for us and the water and boards.
Yeah, so in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, I organized a protest on land. And it was the first protest I had ever organized. And at the same time of that event, there was a paddle out happening in the water. And you were able to clearly see who was welcome in the water space and who was missing very clearly. The entire community of those in the most mourning Black folks, people of color, were not centered or present at that first paddle out. And a few days later, I saw a flyer for another one and really reached out to the organizer of just what are your plans to intentionally include and center Black folks and people in the most mourning in this moment. And she didn't have one. And I really didn't want that second event in Santa Cruz to be a reflection of that white sea of faces that we see so often represented in the lineup. I wanted it to really be integrated with the Black community and folks who maybe wanted to access an event like this, but didn't know how, myself included, didn't have access to a surfboard, didn't have access to a wetsuit, and really just use social media to call out that disconnect in the moment of, what are y'all going to do to make sure that Black people can actually attend? White folks, are you willing to actually step out and make space, leave your board on the beach so someone who maybe has never had one can access this event? And so I collaborated with the organizer to make that possible. We coordinated with a local surf shop, and a group of us, about 15 of us, suited up at Cal Surf Shop for the first time to brave the ocean, to join that experience.
And that talk about the emotional impact, the spiritual impact, and then mission driven impact of what happened to you on that board at that paddle.
Of course. So the moment we paddled out, all of us very nervous and timid, but also excited to have a place to channel the energy of grief that we were feeling, grief and rage. Um, so we paddled out really like hesitant to a sea of white faces who were waiting for a group of BIPOC folks to make it out to the lineup chanting Black Lives Matter. And for me, it felt like the world really stopped. And it was just this moment into what surfing and what access could be when we center folks who are excluded. It was the most I've ever in that moment felt like I had belonged in Santa Cruz and felt so seen. And it was just this moment of like, how can we run this back? How can we expand who's able to access this feeling? And so as we were paddling back in, someone jokingly, you know how we are, was just like, you know what, we should start a Black Surf Club. Like this needs to happen again. And so that same group of us just stayed in contact over the summer. And in September 2020, we hosted our first ever free surf lesson. And I caught a wave for the first time. And it was just the most incredible experience after living near the ocean for over 15 years, never imagining that for myself. Was just like, how can we make sure that more people get to decide for themselves if this is for them, and just experience that joy and that feeling of awe and ease that so many Black and BIPOC folks don't get to experience, the luxury of leisure and the luxury of just rest and being held by the ocean. And so really wanting to create an experience where people could decide for themselves.
I say a lot, folks know I'm in recovery, and I say a lot. I grew up in Nevada, so it couldn't have happened. But had I had a surfboard put in my hand instead of a drink or another substance when I was 12, my life would have been very different. That's the only thing I can say about like experiencing that, catching that wave, that what that does to you inside, the healing. Bella, on the panel that you were on that I was talking about, I brought this up, epigenetics, right? We know the science. So we know that Black folks are born with the transatlantic slave horror in our DNA, right? We are born with the remnants, the memory, the remembrance of our ancestors that comprise the largest underwater graveyard in the world. And then we see that manifest in Black people having a certain relationship or non-relationship with the water that of course is compounded by white supremacy and all other stuff and who gets who and segregation of beaches and blah, blah, blah. Talk about how through the work of Black Surf Santa Cruz you're healing that trauma and that disconnect and how you've seen that
Yeah.
manifest in Black bodies.
Absolutely. Well, we see that manifest so often in just the stereotype of Black folks don't swim, Black folks don't surf, and in the legacy of why we see that. And so when I think about ancestral trauma, I also think about like ancestral joy and play. And a lot of people don't know that surfing has native roots to West Africa as well as native Hawaii. And so when I think about that ancestral remembrance, we also have the before, what happened before the transatlantic slave trade. And West Africans had deep ocean and water relationships that was very intentionally stripped because of our history and because of the legacies of racism, slavery, and the transatlantic slave trade in itself. And so when I learned in my body that surfing had indigenous and native roots to West Africa, it made so much sense to how I felt when I caught that first wave. It felt like such a homecoming. It felt like such a relief and just a cathartic moment for me that I was like, there's no way. And I didn't learn about the history until at least a year or years later after that first experience. But when we watch Black bodies come through our programs and just float and just reconnect with the ocean and water in that way, and then express the experience afterwards and what that really meant for them, a lot of folks will really talk about feeling connected to their ancestors, feeling connected to the ocean, which is like a place we can go and reset and reconnect right in our backyard here in Santa Cruz. And so I really can see it in the Black joy. And when we see our participants catch a wave for the first time, there's this knowing and there's this like just joy and inner child play that's contagious. And I think we've just really seen it play out in folks wanting to come back, bring a friend, surf again and like stick around. But it's been incredibly healing for me myself as well.
So again, doing it again, you have been doing the George Floyd paddle out ever since annually. This year we commemorated the 6 year, we are commemorating because it's ongoing, the 6 year mark of his murder. What is happening for Black Surf Santa Cruz on Friday, June 19th?
We are hosting our sixth annual Liberation Paddle Out because it's only right that we run it back and honor our roots. And so it's a annual celebration and event we host commemorating Juneteenth every year. It's from 12 to 5, and the paddle out will happen at 3 p.m. And we provide free wetsuits, free surfboards, trained coaches to help people enter the water for the first time, should they choose. There's a live DJ on the beach, and it's just a day in celebration of Black joy here in Santa Cruz.
Can people still sign up? And if not, and even if so, if they're like I know some folks, some of our folks that come in, but are like I'm coming, but I'm not getting in the water. What other activities besides or in addition to paddling out are available for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, it's a huge day of just chilling on the beach, being near the water. One thing we see is every year people kind of moving closer and closer to the water, whatever that feels like to them. So hanging out on the beach, listening to music, there will be prizes, games, art activities going on, adornment making. So we'll be making flower crowns and necklaces to adorn our Black community as we paddle out and throw the flowers and offering at the actual paddle out. There will be free sand lessons and ultimately just a day to get your toes in the sand and be out in the sunshine and community.
And where do folks go to say, yo, I'm coming, and where do they show up and all that other stuff?
Yeah, they can go to our website, blacksurfsantacruz.org. You can go to the Liberation Paddle Out tab for all information on how to RSVP, reserve equipment, volunteer, donate, support, all of that good stuff. Or you can just pull up on us at the beach. It's at Cal Beach on Friday, June 19th, starting at noon. We'll be down there till 5 p.m.
We remain the vanguard of resistance of this country. The terrorists are law enforcement agents that are working to kidnap, disappear, and incarcerate our community members. And I want us to be real clear, we ain't never seen no time like this. This is a new game, and you all better sit down. You better sit down and inhale the realities that are on the street right now. And understand that the moves that we have made now, that the impacts of our people, the increased desperation, the increased violence, the increased homelessness, the increased deportation, the increase, all of that is coming down the road. And so people ask me what to do now, get ready.